What are the commonalities among leaders who sustain excellence over an extended period of time?
Jay, Hennessey, man, it's so good to see you and talk to you here on the Learning Leader Show. Welcome, man.
Absolutely. Great to be here. Thanks, Ryan.
So I want to start by talking about a phrase you've used that is important to me, that I've experienced in my life, and you certainly have experienced it, and that is shared adversity. Our mutual friend, Mike D'Andrea, sent me an email saying, one day you have to participate in Jay's MOFO, which is a mandatory optional fitness opportunity. And there is a lot to it, but I would love for you to describe the importance of shared adversity and how MOFOs come from that.
Sure. Well, I guess to back up, the idea is a monster mash, and it's a weekly workout that in the Navy we would do, on Fridays. It was usually team-based, competitive in nature. And there's just, I don't know, it's part of that secret sauce. It just makes great teams. You sweat together, you get your adrenaline, and endorphins are flowing. So when I transitioned to the Indians, we were at spring training, and a couple guys talked about we should do a workout. And I just threw it out there. Hey, let's do a monster mash. And it kind of caught on. Folks were interested. And then when we came back to Cleveland with the broader organization on the business side, there was folks that were interested as well. And so the MOFO is kind of a double entendre. The joke was that these are always optional, and it became the running joke that was like, yeah, mandatory optional. But the other woman in the Indians organization that has kind of been a huge part of this, and really probably a bigger part than me, is Mary for Kappa, and her nickname is MOFO. So the mandatory optional, we kind of tacked on the fitness opportunity, and we ended up with the name MOFO, which is this weekly event that we do. We've carried it on through COVID on Zoom. We do a weekly workout. But the shared adversity, I think we talked in person about this. I just think that this is a thing that's what is really creates a foundation for teams when you do something hard, and it doesn't have to be fitness, right? I mean, it can be, we've talked in our organization how leaders have worked on a project, whether it's a big arbitration project, and they've spent, hours, digging into the data and long days and long nights, and maybe even an all-nighter. And after that, that's the thing that's kind of the glue to that, taking the relationship to the next level that builds trust, and it's just great. So I'm always a big advocate of, I think it's really easy to do in organizations. Just find the thing that you could bring people together that has a little bit of a suck factor and it's fun. Yeah.
So I would imagine you first felt the power of shared adversity as a Navy SEAL. I mean, the training just to become a SEAL is legendary. And then once you become one, you still have to maintain that training in order to prepare yourself for some of the scariest missions in the world. And I'd love for you, can you share some of your time, maybe earlier as a SEAL, when you first realized, wait a second, when I look to my left and I look to my right, I have complete trust of my brothers next to me because we went through something tough together. I know they can handle it. And the power of that feeling of, I would imagine, because I experienced this through football workouts, of this feeling of we are invincible. Now, you're actually fighting battles, which is different. So I don't know the mindset there, but for me, I know that led me to build so much confidence in the fact that I felt we are going to be successful because of what we did in January, June, July, August. All of a sudden, it's October on a Friday night. My brothers are next to me. I know what we're about to do because of what we did leading up to that. And that's what you've experienced as a SEAL, both preparing to be one and then after being one for 20 plus years. I'd love to hear your mindset around that.
Yeah, I think your intro is spot on. I mean, really anyone who's listening that has been part of a team has felt this. It's just the degree to which they felt it. If you've been on a great team, whether that's a sales team or a football team or a SEAL team, you've experienced the same thing. So in SEAL training early on, there's just so many things that are baked into the program that just create this, camaraderie where it's the instructors against the class, right? You've got this class of young trainees and that's all you've got to your left and right is these super motivated, hard dudes that want to become Navy SEALs, and the instructors who are just crushing you at every evolution, everything you do. And just when you think you're doing it right, they tell you to hit the serve or drop down for push-ups. But the evolutions are also so team-based. You've had Admiral McCraven on, and I think he does a great job of talking about paddling the boat. It's such a great analogy, but it's real. Like, you can't get through the surf if everybody's not paddling at the same time, working together. For anybody that's watched anything on the SEALs or SEAL team training, you'll often see a picture of guys locked arms laying in the surf zone. And I think for most that make it through, like, once you're locked arms with guys, guys who yell, "You can't hurt us," right? And they're jackhammering, they're freezing, but you've got your buddies to your left and right locking arms. And I think that just sets the foundation that as you go through training, whether you're in a SEAL platoon or in a troop, doing training exercises, and again, the shared adversity, it's part of the SEAL team training ritual. The instructor cadre is always trying to make it harder, but your fire team or your squad or your platoon is always stepping up to the challenge. So I think it's a different environment, but it's the exact same thing that you talked about on the football team.
How would you take this? And this is something I try to do because I've learned from the value of going through so many challenging workouts. And it was both physical and mental, because you had to have the mentality and the mental resilience, I would say, to not only get through it, but to thrive through it and be ready to go when you're done. Now let's translate that to what you and I and many people listening are doing, where they aren't working in a physical environment. There are military personnel listening to this for sure, but there's a lot of people who work within companies listening, say, well, how could we mimic what Jay did with the SEALs, what Ryan did on the football field, and do this in our lives, in our businesses, to create shared adversity, to build our culture in order to achieve the levels that we strive to achieve? What are some ideas, maybe some tactics, some things that we could do to implement that in our businesses?
Yeah, that's a great question, Ryan. I think the responsibility of leaders to one, be clear that this is a thing that they want to achieve. I mean, great teams don't happen by happenstance. There's a deliberate process. In our organization, we call it teaming, right? And we ask folks to think about, what was the best team you were on? What happened? We actually go through a process where we write down what our purpose is, what's our mission, what's our vision, what are the norms, what's the culture we want to create, how are we going to work together? So I think there's a part of it is being very deliberate up front. And then I think there's another part of, like, the language that you use is pretty important, right? The way you incentivize the organization is pretty important. You can't, I think it's challenging when you want to have a great team, but the language is all about the individual, or the I's versus the we's. I think in our organization, our leadership does a great job of really, being collaborative in how we attack problems. So it's never the individual contributor. It's always bringing the team together to solve the problem. So without really understanding the specific space, I think the first part is being deliberate. And that doesn't have to happen, you don't have to wait until to start a new team. You could take your existing team and say, hey, let's get together. Let's talk about who we want to be as a team. Mm-hmm. And then I think as a leadership team, making sure that you're sending the right signals, using the right language.
I sense this because I had the good fortune to meet with you, Josh Gibson, Dan Coyle, and your president, Chris, of the team. And one of the takeaways, I remember I called my wife when I was driving home from Cleveland that day was, she said, you know, what was it like? What were those guys like? And I said, it was incredible to see their curiosity, their desire to learn, the questions they asked, the fact that they made no assumptions. It was just with this wide open mind. And I sense that when your leaders approach others from outside the organization with that mindset, that has to be inspiring for the entire organization to say, oh, this is the way we do things here. And so I'd love for you to share your thought process with the Cleveland Indians from the leadership, the top down, and how that impacts you when you want to build a learning organization.
Sure. You threw out a lot there. For starters, Dan Coyle is like, you know, the ultimate connector. He's actually how I got connected with the Indians. And as I think back to the early conversations, you know, Dan just saying, hey, there's someone you gotta talk to. And being a big fan of his book at the time, Talent Code, I was like, yeah, absolutely. So, you know, the first conversation I had with leaders in the Indians, I had the same takeaway. It was like, wow, I can't get a question in edgewise because they just keep, and what does that look like? And how do you do that? And what does that look like? And I think you probably felt the same thing when people are asking you questions. It's super energizing because you're passionate about what you do. I think it's great that we do it. It's probably almost a shortfall at times because you know the four of us were ganging up on you. I doubt you got to even ask us a question. But I think there's something there that there really is this. It's not made up. People are really curious. How do you do what you do? Like, share with us what you've learned. I know before you visited, we were all looking at the list of people you've had on your podcast. We're like, oh my gosh, this is unbelievable. If we can just get 1% of every conversation you've had. And so I think as an organization that's just a real thing. And I do think there's a lot to unpack with that. You know, I think you've heard me share before. I think it's like an organizational humility that we're just not on transmit saying, hey, look at us. And I think as an organization, we have a lot to be proud about, but I think it really does demonstrate our curiosity to learn from others.
Can you share more about how you go from being a 25 plus year Navy guy, special forces, training others, traveled the world, countless missions, at least I don't know how many, but all over the place. And when you finish, you decide to move your family from beautiful San Diego, which I've learned that you learned and like to surf, but you move from San Diego to Cleveland, Ohio, to run alongside Josh Gibson to run learning and development as a senior leader within the organization. How does that happen?
Yeah, that's a great question. We moved not only from San Diego to Cleveland, but we did it in December. So that means when you're driving through Colorado, your windshield wiper freezes. You know, the connection, as I mentioned, started with Dan and connected me with the organization. And, you know, I think all leaders on our journey, as we're maturing through our organizations, we're connecting with people in other organizations because we are curious. And the connection that I made with the Indians, or that Dan made, you know, we just found a lot of overlap of interest. You know, people who are, you know, big readers and thinking about leadership and thinking about how do we get, you know, how do we constantly make our organization better? And the job I was in at the time was training Navy SEALs. It was you know, at our schoolhouse, and that was something that I spent a lot of time thinking about. So as I was, you know, going through my transition process and, you know, thinking about the different opportunities that were out there, you know, it was actually reaching out to the Indians organization, talking about a different opportunity I had in front of me. And, you know, asking essentially some, mentorship and advice of how to navigate the process. And that's when Chris was like, well, like, walk me through, like, what does that job look like? And then they kind of shared how they were looking at an opportunity within the organization. And it just kind of spiraled from there. It started with a discussion of, what would a job like this look like in our organization? And a couple months later, there's an opportunity in front of me, and my family and I jumped at it.
Wow. And that was in December 2017?
That's right. I think I officially came on board in September, and then we moved the family in December at the midpoint of the school year.
So one of the things I know that you are working towards and that you're currently doing is building and creating a learning organization. And the book, The Fifth Discipline by Peter, can you pronounce his last name?
Senge is how I pronounce it. I'm not sure that's how it's pronounced, but
I don't know either. Senge.
That's right.
Ryan Holiday said it's always a good thing when you see people don't fully know how to pronounce certain words, because it means you read a lot. So you're always just reading it. But anyway, and I pulled one of his quotes, and I want you to talk about it, because I've been fortunate to be a part of your team's calls where you collect and gather incredible leaders from all over the world, a lot of them with a sports background, but not completely. Mm-hmm. And one of the quotes that Josh shared on one of the calls, Josh Gibson, your colleague of yours, and another incredible leader himself, a quote from Fifth Discipline is, the discipline of team learning starts with dialogue, the capacity of members of a team to suspend assumptions and enter into a genuine, quote, thinking together. To the Greeks, dialogos, D-I-A space L-O-G-O-S, dialogos meant a free flowing of meaning through a group, allowing the group to discover insights not attainable individually. It also involves learning how to recognize the patterns of interaction in teams that undermine learning. And when you guys shared that quote, I thought, this is how great cultures are built. This is how a learning organization is built, when you focus on dialogue and bringing people together. Can you talk more about your overall philosophy on being a leader who brings people together to have dialogue?
Yeah, absolutely. And it is an amazing book. It's a heavy one. I'd recommend doing it with a partner, because there's a lot to it. But in that chapter and throughout the book, he really compares dialogue versus discussion. And discussion, where you're coming to the table to really, my words, convince the other person of your beliefs. And dialogue is really about you can have your strong convictions, but you're willing to listen and learn from the other person. I think Dan Coyle says it best when he says something to the effect of strong convictions loosely held. So you come in armed and educated, but you're really approaching it from, I may be wrong. It happens quite a bit. So what if I'm wrong? So I think that is fundamentally at the heart of how we think about creating a learning organization. And I think it has to do with, I think there's two things going on here. One is reps. How do you get reps at the thing you're trying to do? So the example we talked about, reading Fifth Discipline, you can get a rep by reading it by yourself, but you can get exponentially more reps by reading it with another person and sharing what you talked about. Hey, what did you get from that? And I think that's kind of foundational to our model as we look at learning opportunities is how do we have the engagement, but dialogue, where people come together sharing their perspective. I think the other component on the learning organization, I don't know where this concept of just-in-time learning originated. There's some great articles on the web, but Dr. Clint Longnecker out of University of Toledo, his son works in our scouting department. He spoke on our speaker series, and just unbelievable amount of content. But one of the things he talked about was engaging the learner with learning that is just in time, just for you, or just in case. And we think about it in those three buckets. So when you could have learning that is just in time, right out of the supply chain management idea that you're working, you're in the hiring season. So let's have some content talking about behavioral interviewing. How do you do recruiting? How do you, right now we're working remotely. So we've got some just-in-time learning on remote coaching. What does that look like? So I think the quote you shared is super foundational to how we think about a learning organization. But I also think that really, as we think about creating opportunities, we're really looking for those just-in-time engagements.
Well, maybe the question I should have asked at the beginning of this, Jay, is why does this matter? I mean, at the end of the day, the Cleveland Indians, I don't know the full goals of ownership, but I know probably the primary goal is to win baseball games and to win a championship. And the goal of a lot of business leaders is to stay in business, provide for their customers, earn a profit, take care of their employees, right? Those types of things. Why is it important to have people working for the organization whose only jobs are to build a learning organization? Because Chris Antonetti, the president of the team, is saying, and I assume even above him is saying, it is worth it for us to invest money into people like you and Josh and others to have a learning organization. And there's someone who may be listening saying, well, should I invest money in my business to have people focused on creating a learning organization? Why is that important enough to do it? What do you think, both from your perspective as well as from the people who have hired you?
Sure. And, we'll acknowledge the bias up front when you
Sure.
ask the learning and development guy why learning is important.
And the guy who has a show called The Learning Leader. But I think we understand this is why we're friends, but also
That's right.
You're biased here that I think it's the correct answer, but I try to understand that there are skeptics and I want to speak to them too.
Sure.
Yep.
Yeah. We're going to uncork a lot here. So when you look at I think it comes out to a competitive advantage, right? We're looking to have a competitive advantage where other people aren't. But when you go back to this idea of great teams, if you break down great teaming, the team is learning. And I don't think it's learning just to learn, right? We know that if we keep doing what we're doing today, 5 years, I don't care what your job is, unless you're making widgets, you're going to be irrelevant. Like you have to learn with the technology as things are growing. But for the individual, nobody wants to stay stagnant. The people that we hire, I should say, the people that we hire are passionate. They're curious people. They want to be best in industry, whatever they're doing. So we got to give them the tools and the opportunities for their personal growth and development that makes that team better. But I think internally, the big so what is we believe that. We believe that if we don't have a deliberate process to think about how we're going to make everyone better in our organization, every process, double loop learning, not just the incremental things, but step back and think about the entire process, we'll be irrelevant. We'll be outpaced by the industry.
And what are some of the, I guess I could ask you this in the form of day-to-day operations for you.
Sure.
What does it actually look like? I know no 2 days are the same, but if you could walk through some of the things that you do on a daily basis, what does putting this into practice look like?
Yeah, I guess for a little bit more context, like there is no compliance model with learning and development in the Cleveland Indians baseball operations. There's no like mandatory do your Thursday learning session. That's not how it works. So we are following the interest of the learner, the people that have passion and want to get better. So oftentimes we're responding to people saying, hey, I want to get better at remote coaching. Hey, I want to get better at behavioral interviewing. I want to get better at fill in the blanks. And we're kind of sitting down with them and being like, okay, like, what are you thinking about? Have you seen this somewhere else? Let's come up with some ideas. Who else can we loop in? Josh and I, we talk a lot about, we rarely are the ones delivering the content. I mean, we may synthesize something from a book or some readings into something digestible, but part of our goal is like, who's best in the industry? With this remote coaching, we work with former KIPP school leader, Mark Manella, and bring Mark in and say, Mark, help us out. And then he's looped in other people. So I think the day-to-day is really trying to understand what's the interest of people in our organization? Where's the demand signal to get better? And then how can Josh and I be a resource? How can we connect the learner with great content? And, I do think there's times when we've created great opportunities, but we're usually just setting the table, right? And, getting everybody in the right spot and putting the right topic and having the right resources. And then the thing kind of takes off. I guess I would liken it to, you've been on our speaker series, you've spoken on our speaker series. We loved it. That's like the perfect example where we bring people on a monthly call, and we have someone that has a great base of knowledge or experience like yourself. You shared for 25, 30 minutes. Then we tell the group, all right, go break into rooms. What did you learn? What did you talk about? And it's amazing what happens when you provide the opportunity for people who are passionate. Nobody had to sit in on your call. So everybody who shows up is like, they're into it.
One key point, and this is something we've talked about, you can't passively attend an Indians team's call. Meaning, if you want to sit and just watch, it's better to not join, because you get in the breakout rooms, and I've been in breakout rooms with some people that I've watched play on TV that I really look up to, and all of a sudden we're four equals in this room, and you better bring it. You better bring it. I think that's a key part of building teams, and you could do this within your company, regardless of where you work. Is okay, you have the base set of content, whatever it is. You hope it's good, and that's what you guys do. You find the best of the best. That's why I'm very honored to have played a role in delivering some of that content. Then you break it down into the smaller groups, and it's time for them to do the quick synthesis of that and share some key takeaways and some things that they could then implement. And I think if you're doing this if you're listening, doing this within a business, that is a key point. It's don't just sit there and passively take in a lecture. Actually do it. Actually write down how you're going to implement it, or what you think at a minimum, and then go to practical application. That is a key component, that people leave your calls with specific takeaways that will make them better and make their organizations better. And it seems that you've found something there that is really powerful.
Yeah. So we've done a lot of homework on how adults learn. Like the foundational to thinking about learning and development is understanding how people learn. And then the second part is, what's the science of learning and teaching? Like what do the best teachers do? Doug Lemov has a handful of great books on the topic. One of our favorites is Practice Perfect. But the idea of shifting the cognitive load, right? So I'm stealing all Mark Manella quotes, I think, or Doug Lemov, but who's ever doing the talking is doing the learning. So if you're having a person deliver a 45-minute lecture, they're going to know their material better than anyone, and they're going to get the most impact out of it. But if you can have someone share a little bit and then shift the cognitive load to say, okay, now I want you to either journal or talk in pairs, or talk in a small group on, throw the topic out there and let them have a feeding frenzy on the topic. So I think that's been foundational to, as we think about engagements, how do we make it where we're shifting the cognitive load so the person isn't just passively sitting there taking notes. They have to actually work with the material and ideally struggle with it. There's something that's challenging, that's hard. And on this point, when you can shift who's doing the delivery, right? Having to prepare to deliver some of that content, that person's going to get the biggest benefit.
Yeah, I found one of the reasons that I've leaned into public speaking and doing a lot of keynotes now, even now more of them are on Zoom, which is another interesting battle to win, is the process of preparing to deliver. I know you know this, delivering a keynote is an amazing tool for learning. And then doing it actually where you're a little nervous, if you're on stage in front of hundreds of people, and I always seek feedback and trying to figure out like what really hit, what didn't, what should stay in, what should I throw out. And that's why it was helpful after your team's call with the Indians to say what really landed. What really, I have another one, in fact, today, an hour after we're gonna hang up, Jay, where I am gonna use the stuff that hit on the Indians call, and I'm gonna throw out the stuff that didn't, or at least that wasn't as spoken about as much. So each time you do it, you should be better and better and better. And I think that's just the mindset I sense that you have, your whole organization has. What you had as a SEAL is this thought process of each time I go to do something, whether it's be fight a battle, deliver a talk, help somebody else, is I'm going to be in a better position than I was the last time I did it.
Yeah, just reviewing the notes from your talk, and I think we share, there's a group of us doing a reading group with your book. Your model is, it breaks it down, 4 simple steps, and teaching being a big component of it. Yeah. So we love it. I think, just like you said, what that preparation, that struggle, and then if you could really, even add another layer, imagine if you had to prepare with another person. And that's where we talk about our guys working on a project, whatever that is, when they're working with that other person and they're building each other up, they're building off of each other's ideas. Some pretty cool stuff happens.
And that makes me think of, so you've published some really good pieces of writing. I've publicly shared, you have to write a book. I can't wait to read your book. I'll be an early reader if you want. I don't know how helpful I'll be, but I'll be a fan at minimum. And so I want to go through some of the things that you've written and talk about them a little deeper. Is that cool?
Sure. Yeah, that'd be great.
So one of your mantras of how to be is someone who has a yes and mindset. And I know this comes from a background in improv, which you've studied some, and I've taken some a little myself. But can you share what it means to be a yes and type of a leader?
Absolutely. So it sparked from the book, Yes and, I think it's by Second City. And you read the book, and they're talking about, a foundational element of improv is that you're building off of the other person. And as soon as I read like the first paragraph, I'm like, this is it. This is exactly it. And it's, it's opposite of when you think of the best leaders with whom I've served, they were the ones who were yes and. They don't need to get credit for their idea. They're happy to build off of yours or others in the room. They bring energy to the conversation. It's just the type of people that make it better. And on the opposite, I always joke and say, is Mr. Poopy Pants, the person that you bring the idea and they're like, oh, that'll never work. We tried that already. Well, have you thought about, and they throw all the obstacles out there, almost as if they don't want to be successful. And it's just like, golly, they are de-energizing. How do we not work with them? So I think the yes and mindset is really, one, trying to be the best person you can be to build off of others, but also as you think about, how you hire, I think that's foundational to great organizations.
One of my mentors, Tom Ogburn, told me that leaders cannot be energy neutral. You're either going to bring energy to the group, to the team, or you're going to take it away. You're going to zap it. And I think that's something for us as leaders. We need to think about the responsibility that we have of, am I the type of person who is bringing energy to this group, a yes and mindset, or am I the type of person who's like, I already tried it, it's done. Yeah, that's that. We do it. Why did we do it this way? Well, this is the way we've always done. This is what we're going to do. Okay, like that type of energy zapper, as opposed to the one who's bringing energy to the room. Of let's have a conscious mindset of bringing that to our groups. Because I don't know about you, part of the reason why I enjoy talking to you is because I feel like you bring energy to me. This show, for the most part, I'm pretty picky now about guests. Is I want to be around others who bring energy to me. That's like the number one quality of my wife, I feel like, is she's always bringing this massive positive energy, and I love it. It's so attractive in a person to be around those who are bringing it to the room. And when you think about that, it's like, well, isn't that the type of person I should be then as a leader, you know?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think about some people that I know, and when you see them, you're like, hey, what's going on? They're like, or you say, hey, how are things? And they're like, great, absolutely great. And then there's like a chuckle where you're like, oh man, what's going on? So even like the biggest challenge that they're carrying as a burden, they're still like being positive about it. Like, oh man, I got this issue going on, but there's an ear to ear smile and there's a positivity around it. So I couldn't agree more.
It doesn't mean you don't live in reality. It doesn't mean you don't have problems, but it means like you still have a mindset towards like, I'm going to approach it with positivity. I can still be real. I understand what's going on, but I believe, like I use the term pronoia, which I've written about, that I've learned from reading Adam Grant and others, is this belief that the world is conspiring to help you. And I like thinking of it that way. I like being surrounded by others who believe in pronoia, that if I just keep at it and consistently doing the work, that the world is conspiring to help me be successful. Doesn't mean I don't fall down, I don't get knocked out, I don't lose, right? Certainly that happens, but it's just this consistent belief that if I keep at it, things are going to go well. I like that. Go ahead. Were you going to say something?
No, it's because I love that, conspiring to help you. I mean, that's just such a great framework to just approach life. I love it.
Yeah, it feels better just to live that way, in my opinion. Like that's why a phrase that Miranda and I, my wife, say is "with our luck," and then you say something really positive. So it just happened this weekend. It was supposed to rain, but we said before it started, we were taking our girls to an outdoor mall. And we said, with our luck, we're going to get beautiful weather, right? And it didn't rain. Now, we didn't will it to not rain, right? We got lucky. It didn't rain. But it just having that mindset, it's just a more enjoyable way to live. So use the phrase "with our luck," and they then say something positive, because typically people say, oh, with my luck, and then they say something bad. I don't really enjoy being around people like that. You know, I mean, I will, and I am, but I'd rather be around. I want you, Jay, to say, well, with our luck, we're going to win the pennant or whatever. This Monster Mash is going to be great on Friday because of X. I think that's a much more enjoyable way to live. And that's a choice. That is a choice we all can make. Okay. I think a critical skill that excellent leaders possess, and that you have figured this out, and I want to ask you how, is you seem to have a high level of awareness, both of yourself and of people around you, of kind of whether it's body language or just getting a sense. I've sensed this from you, even on Zoom calls as well as in person. I know this is tough, but how have you developed this skill of having a high level of awareness?
So first, thank you. I actually have thought about this from the standpoint of when anyone transitions from a career after doing 20 plus years, you start thinking about like, what am I bringing? What kind of helped me? And I think the Navy is unique, specifically with junior officers. So you get commissioned, or I was commissioned. I went through SEAL training. I show up at SEAL Team 5, and I'm put in a platoon as the assistant officer in charge. I was the youngest. I was probably the second youngest guy in the platoon. By far the most junior in tenure, but with military rank, you're the second in charge. So you could imagine you've got a bunch of hairy-chested frogmen who are looking at the new ensign. I think early on you learn to show up with a level of humility, and you're trying to say, where do I add value? And I think at least the people who are successful, they are listening very intently on what are the signals around me? What am I walking the right path? for those that are a little slow on the uptake, and we all were, we have senior enlisted in every military unit. And I could think of every senior enlisted leader with whom I've served, from my leading petty officers to my chief petty officers, who were pretty blunt about telling you if you were stepping off the path, hey, sir, you can't do that. Or, hey, you're being a knucklehead. And I think there's, knowing that you had this kind of built-in mentor at every single job you had, you'll always hear officers say, hit yourself to a strong chief and you'll be okay. So you learn early on to speak with a senior enlisted advisor and ask for his help. Hey, you've got more time on planet, more time in the teams. I want to be successful. And the best ones, man, they want you to be successful too. So they're trying to lead, coach, and mentor you to be a successful junior officer and senior officer. So I think the Navy, really, I benefited from being surrounded by great leaders, and then, other great peers that kind of give you a smack on the back of the head if you're off step.
So it sounds like you understood and realized early that surrounding yourself with quality people who cared about you, who were willing to give you honest, critical feedback, played a big role in the development of your self-awareness.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, that, if we're being frank, if you go back to the SEAL teams 30 years ago, if you stepped off track, if you made a buffoon error, it wasn't just hey, you're being a dumbass. You're probably going to get hazed, right? So there was you want to be successful. You want to be a great leader, or else, there's no mincing words.
So part of it is, and I think this can be powerful. I don't know how this works in the business world, so maybe there is no translation. But for me, Jay, I remember I played as a freshman on our varsity team, and I was scared to death of the older guys. Scared both physically, because you could get, there were no red jerseys for the quarterback in practice. You could get literally pounded. Scared to let them down, scared to be the weak link. All I really cared about was not letting them down. And that fear led to an amazing amount of over preparation, of getting as many reps as it took to feel comfortable executing our offense. And if I didn't feel comfortable, I would just do more and just do as much as I needed until I felt like, okay, I think I know what I'm doing, to not let these guys down. And I sense that that's part of it too, where there's some fear, there's some physical abuse, perhaps. There's, in your case, potential death once you actually get on the battlefield. How does that play a role into you developing awareness?
Yeah, I should say, it was a great environment. It was just if you stepped off, you're gonna get it. Guys were gonna let you know.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it was. I understand fear, and I just don't want people to miss. I don't think young leaders are fearful in the Navy, but I think there is this strong burden of pressure to I want to add value. I want to contribute to this team and not let anyone down. I love how you said you didn't want to let these upperclassmen down. I think that's it. And initially, starting your first day of high school, everybody's a little bit nervous. Then you get in your groove, but you're constantly looking okay, how do I add value as a leader? And having folks around you that are going to help you navigate that was powerful.
Yeah. One of the other aspects, I think, of being a SEAL, and that we can take into all aspects of our life, is this mentality to stay ready. And you've said in every aspect of your life, no one cares what you used to be able to do. They care what you can do today. And this is in line with, I learned from previous guest, Andrew Brand, a never peak mantra, meaning I always want to have this trajectory where it's slightly upward, so that there's never really a peak. This is why I don't do crazy diets or dramatically change my workouts. I don't want to lose 50 pounds or something. I want to have a steady increase in my performance. And physical is a big thing for me. It leads to mental. So for you, can you share about this stay ready mindset? This, no one really cares what you used to be able to do. They care what you can do today.
Yeah, I love that never peak. It's just such a great,
Mhm.
catchy phrase. You get it instantly. I think when I've jotted some of my notes and put pen to paper, working in the training schoolhouse, you're speaking to students a lot, and to be honest, it's just a lot of interaction with students. You're always trying to distill down, like, okay, if this 18 to 21-year-old is going to remember one thing, what's it going to be? So I remember writing that down, thinking about my time in the teams when you're in a training cycle, or maybe you just come back from deployment, but you know that you can get called back. So it was this idea of like, hey, there's no excuses. Like if the old man calls us back in here and says something's brewing, we can't tell him that we need 2 weeks, right? Like, we got to be ready to go. And I think the best leaders with whom I've served always had that mentality, whether it was on downtime or on a Saturday. You still see guys showing up at work, still going into the gym, still working on their gear and their cage. At some commands, even still going to the range. Saturday morning, they're still grabbing their guns, going down, getting a half hour or an hour of range time. And it's just this idea of like, we can't take off our pack. It's a phrase in the military about, when you take your pack off, you're just resting. So you can't take off your pack.
Um, I'm pulling some of this from a letter that you've written to yourself, to your an earlier self, and one of the key aspects of leadership is actually writing it down. And I love to hear your process of how you've synthesized these ideas, the importance of writing it down, why you've decided to publish these, even though you kind of hide your website, but you published these out there that I could find it and I could read them and I loved them. That's why I'm pushing you to write a book. But why that you've chosen to do that and the value you see in it from a leadership perspective.
Yeah. So, I mean, the vast majority of what I do is based on being a father of 4 kids, being, married to my wife, or my time in the Navy. And I think this idea of writing things down just comes on I think the Navy or the military does a lot of great stuff. And one of them is really getting leaders to think deeply about every next level of leadership. So when you are about to take command, become a commanding officer, you go off to school for a week or two. And one of the things they would encourage you to do is write your command philosophy. And it's, at its best, the leader will write their command philosophy, and it's, published at their command, and it's something they refer back to. For me, it was really less about this document that you had, published, but it was about being deliberate, thinking, okay, I'm going to take time to think about what I need to do in command. What is my approach going to be? So I never cared if anybody read my philosophy. And I doubt many people did, but it was so important to understand like where I was at the end of that journey with writing my command philosophy. So as I transitioned out of the Navy, it's coming to the Indians, it just became a thing where I was like, I got to be deliberate on what is my leadership philosophy? Like, how do I want to show up? And I'm not sure how great it is, but I'll be honest with you, I probably knocked that thing out in about 10 minutes. And it was just
Really?
a simple brainstorming of like, who do I want to be? And
I was going to say, what are some of the, so for somebody listening who wants to write their command philosophy, we can get tactical here for a second, Jay. What are some of the prompts? Because I'm a prompt-driven writer. I don't know about you, and it sounds like this is kind of there are some prompts here. When I say that, I mean, when I was writing my book, I would sit with partners and others to help me, and they would just toss questions, and I would either write or type and then go back by myself and really go deeper on each of those ideas. But the prompts were very critical, really helpful in my process. What are some prompts for people if they say, oh, I haven't written that. I haven't written my command philosophy. What are some things they could answer to help get them started?
That's a great question. I wish I had printed out. We actually lead a workshop with our organization of helping folks do this, but it's really questions to make people reflect. One of them is, who are 5 leaders that you've been really impressed about in your career? What was it that they did? we've often asked, who are 5 leaders in history that you've been impressed by? What was it that they did? We've borrowed a values exercise from Case Western University. We went through their coaching program, and I've seen it other places, but it's essentially, 150 values, and you kind of circle the 15 that resonate with you, and then you prioritize the top 10, and then you break it down to the 5. And boy, when you can only have 5 out of this list of 150, it's hard, but it gets you thinking at a level that you otherwise would not. And there's a few other things about, like what would your mission statement be? What's your vision? Where do you want to be in 10 years? So I think there's a few of those. The one that I wrote is kind of intertwined my personal and professional life, which I don't think you can, we've talked about this whole work-life balance. I don't think I can't separate the two. It's like I show up, this is who I am, married, father of 4, work in the Cleveland Indians, used to be a Navy guy. Like, this is me. So I think the prompts I'm thinking about leaders with whom you most respect, what your values really are. And, at your best, it's kind of aspirational. Who do you want to be? How do you want to show up?
One of the other aspects I think of that I found in common with great leaders is they have a knack for connecting amazing people. Jason Gaynard calls himself a talent scout. He's always scouting talent and then finding connections for them. And I've heard, and I've personally seen you do this really well. And I heard that this is something that you've been doing for many years, including when you were in the Navy as a SEAL. Can you share your thoughts and philosophy on being a connector of people and why that's important to you?
Yeah. I think we may have talked about this once before, but like the idea of networking, I think for many just has like a negative connotation. I don't know. It just feels like, you're passing up business cards, but connecting is like, you're trying to find someone that you can help out. You can connect them with someone else. Hey, you guys have similar interests, or maybe someone that you want to partner with because you're just so curious about what they do, the book that they wrote, like you got to know more. So I think throughout my career, this has become a bigger thing. And probably when I was working at the SEAL Training Center, really thinking about how do adults learn, and got interested in the book Make It Stick by Rodiger and Brown, and thinking about deliberate practice, kind of read Dan Coyle's book Talent Code, thinking about deliberate practice, and went to the author Anders Ericsson, Peak. So started thinking, like, how do we get those leaders to come to the Naval Special Warfare Center and share what they learned? And the first time you ask someone and they say, sure, we'd love to come visit, you're like, whoa, all I had to do was ask. So I think that has, specifically engaging with Mr. Rodiger made me realize that, when you reach out to someone and say you're curious about their work or curious about what they do, they're often very willing to help. And I think that has just kind of spiraled through my career. And when people are willing to do that with you, then you want to share as well. So I think it becomes this, like, it just grows exponentially. Everybody's looking to connect. Hey, you know who you should talk to, or and I think it's just super powerful for the organization.
As a connector, one of the, I think, aspects of you that probably has a kind of a magnetic force is this level of confidence I sense, as well as a comfort in your own skin. I said the same thing to recent guest Jack Butcher, and I think you exude this as well, that I think people want, I mean, I know I do, I'll speak for myself. I like being around others who you sense a comfort in their skin. You sense a confidence that's been built through work, through achievement, through helping others. How when you reflect on this, how do you sense that you have built up this comfort in your skin of who you are, fully understanding yourself, as well as the confidence that you've built over the years?
That's a great question. I think I go back to the Navy on all this stuff. I think when you show up at SEAL training, there's just this model of these tasks that get incrementally harder and harder and harder. When you show up, you have to tie knots underwater, and the next thing, your hands and feet are tied, and you have to do things underwater, and you have to swim underwater 50 meters, and next thing you're in Hell Week, and it progresses through training, which I think creates, to sound super nerdy, this self-efficacy model where you get these challenges and you learn that if you follow the training and you work hard, you can achieve it. And inevitably, there's a few people that probably go through SEAL training without failing something, but I wasn't one of them. So you learn that it's okay to fail. You've pushed your edge, you failed. They have a program to help you figure out how to pass it, and then you overcome it. And it's pretty cool to learn, man, I could push myself and fail, and then I could work at it and pass. And then through my career, I've had a ton of times when I failed, and at the time feeling like, oh my gosh, this is insurmountable. But then you know what? You've got this team, you come together and you overcome it. So I think there's a track record of, solving problems with a great team of people, being part of something bigger than you, that maybe you get to a point, at least where I am, where I know I don't have it all figured out, but I know I've got great people that are on the left and right of me, and I'm sure we can figure it out. So
there are ways we could this kind of ties it back to the shared adversity, but are there ways that we could, for let's say a company, I work with a company that most of their hires are 23, and their whole model, and this is a big company, their whole model is just to promote from within, for every job, rarely hire externally, so that they need to really develop their people, because one day those people are going to be leading their businesses and their business. How would we take from what the Navy SEALs do and implement that into a place like that, where those people are just graduating college and maybe they have a background that they've played sports or have some military, or there are other things that create shared adversity, but what are ways we could put that into play in the business world?
That's a great question. I think there's something powerful about when folks see other people stumble and then recover. I think when leaders share when they screwed something up, it's a powerful message. I love in Dan Coyle's book when he talks about the restaurant in New York. I'm going to screw up the story, but the point of it was, this person is going to be the maitre d' that day, and she's never done it before. And he says, hey, if you don't come and ask for help at least 10 times today, this is going to go horribly wrong. So how cool is that? You're the boss, and you're sending the signal to your employee that, hey, I know you don't have it figured out. I trust you because we've done all the right things. We've hired you, you're trained, you're empowered, but you're going to need help, and we're here to help you. So, it goes back to what we talked about before with teaming. I think leaders of organizations need to figure out, how are they going to do this? When people in their organization have done this well, what happened there? And having a deliberate plan that focuses on it. I think it's great.
I love it. And I have a feeling, I have a sense of what you might say, but from being a longtime listener, which I'm very grateful for, you and your organization, that I study people who sustain excellence, and I'm fascinated by the makeup of those types of individuals and the stories behind people who do that. So when you take a moment and think about others in your life who have sustained excellence over an extended period of time, what have you found those individuals have in common?
Yeah, I love when you ask this question. And I think everybody, when they give their answers, I'm always in agreement that, exactly. I guess when I think about it, I do the both, like the best and worst leaders with whom I've served. I think it comes down to humility. And the humility is the enabler for curiosity. It's the enabler for giving praise and gratitude to someone else, not having to be the center of attention, or not having to, everybody can be good, not just that person. And at its worst, people without humility, they don't want to change their mind, or ideas aren't as good if it's not theirs. And so anyway, very long answer. I think it's humility.
So I want to unpack that a bit, because humility comes before curiosity. Explain what you mean by that.
Well, I think we all agree, like, curiosity is this attribute that we want from people.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really easy when you're, a 21-year-old ensign. I'm curious all day long because I don't really know anything. But when you're 26 years in the Navy as a Master Chief or as a Navy captain, can you stay curious? Can you still ask the questions? When you're the general manager of a baseball team, can you still ask your staff, what am I missing? Hey, what are you seeing that I'm not? I don't think I have this right. Help me understand what you're seeing. Not everybody can do that. There's a lot of people that get to a level in their career where they think they have it figured out. And I think that could be debilitating for a leader.
Man, that's such a great example or way to describe what a learning leader is, in my opinion. And I love that you distinguish between why humility needs to come first in order to enable, your quote, humility is the enabler for curiosity. I love that. I'm going to use that. Jay, thanks so much, man. I'm so grateful for your friendship and from our times getting to talk and hang out. I look forward to many more in the future, but thank you so much for being here today, man.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure. I'm looking forward to when we can have you and your girls up here to catch a game in person.
I can't wait, man. I can't wait. Is there anywhere you'd like to send people to learn more about you online?
No, but thank you for asking.
I knew what you were going to say. All right. Thanks so much, man. We'll talk soon.
All right, Ryan.
Bye.